Chapter 1. The Tale. Folks were too scared to tell. Out in the Badlands of West Texas, where the wind howls through the canyons like the screams of the damned, there was a story the old Apache elders would only whisper when the moon went dark. They said, deep beneath the Guadalupe Mountains, long before the white man ever set foot on that cursed ground, there lived a woman who didn't belong to this world. Her name was Nalin. In the Apache tongue, it meant the maiden. But there wasn't nothing maidenly about that creature. Nalin stood over 8 feet tall. Her eyes were black as the space between stars, and her skin looked like it had been baked by 1,000 summers of unforgiving desert sun. The Apache didn't consider her human. She was something older, something that had been walking those lands when the first men were still learning how to strike a fire. And Nalin kept a secret that would make men kill their own brothers just to find out what it was. Chapter 2. The lake that had no business existing. Deep in those caverns, where sunlight had never once touched the stone, there was a lake of black, still water. An impossible lake, fed by underground rivers that came from places no map had ever charted. And in that lake, floating in eternal silence, lived creatures so pale you could see right through them. They glowed with a sickly blue light that made your stomach turn just looking at it. Jellyfish. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. But these weren't no ordinary jellyfish. These things had no business existing in fresh water, had no business existing in caves, had no business existing at all. Nalin called them the Daughters of Healing, and every single night she'd climb down to that lake and sing to them in a language that wasn't Apache, wasn't human, wasn't from this earth at all. Chapter 3. The Soldier Who Should Have Died. In the winter of 1849, a young Texas Ranger named Elijah Cutter got himself gut-shot during a skirmish with Comancheros near the Pecos River. The bullet had torn through his belly and come out his back. Any man with sense knew that was a death sentence. Wasn't no doctor alive who could fix what that lead had done to his insides. His company left him for dead under a mesquite tree, said their goodbyes, and rode on. But Elijah didn't die. 3 days later, burning with fever and half out of his mind, he crawled into a cave to escape the vultures that had been circling him since sundown. That's when he saw her. A shadow that blocked out what little light came through the cave mouth, a figure so tall it had to stoop to fit inside, and eyes that reflected back at him like 2 pools of spilled oil. Elijah Cutter should have screamed, should have drawn his pistol, should have prayed to the Almighty for salvation. Instead, he passed out cold. Chapter 4. The Cure That Felt Like Dying. When Elijah came to, he was floating. His body was submerged in water so cold it felt like liquid ice was flowing through his veins. Above him, he could see the cavern ceiling covered in formations that looked like the teeth of some giant beast. And all around him, pressing against his skin, were those glowing creatures, the jellyfish. They covered him like a living blanket, their tentacles wrapped around his arms, his legs, his torso, and everywhere they touched, it burned. Lord Almighty, it burned like hellfire itself. Elijah tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then he heard her voice. Nalin was standing at the edge of the lake, watching him with those bottomless eyes. She spoke in broken English, her voice deep as thunder rolling across the plains. The daughters take the death from you, but they must give it somewhere else. That is the price. That has always been the price. Elijah didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. Chapter 5. The Man Who Walked Out Whole. 4 days later, Elijah Cutter walked out of that cave without so much as a scar on his belly. The wound that should have killed him was gone, vanished, like it had never been there at all. He made his way back to Fort Davis, where his company had already written a letter to his mama, telling her that her son had died a hero's death in service of Texas. When Elijah walked through those gates, men dropped to their knees and started praying. They thought they were seeing a ghost. Some of them crossed themselves and ran. Others just stood there with their mouths hanging open like they'd lost the ability to speak. But Elijah wasn't a ghost. He was alive, more alive than he'd ever been. And that should have been the end of the story. A miracle in the desert. A man saved by forces beyond understanding. But miracles, as folks would soon learn, don't come free. Chapter 6. The First Death That Made No Sense. 2 weeks after Elijah's return, a young private named Thomas Whitley dropped dead in the middle of the mess hall. 1 second he was eating his beans and hardtack, laughing about something another soldier had said. The next second, he just stopped. His eyes went wide, his fork clattered to the table, and he fell face first into his plate. The camp doctor examined the body for 3 hours. He couldn't find a single thing wrong with the boy. No wound, no sickness, no sign of poison. It was like Thomas Whitley's heart had just decided to quit beating for no reason at all. The chaplain called it an act of God. But Elijah knew better. He remembered what Nolan had said. They must give it somewhere else. The jellyfish had taken the death out of him, and they had given it to Thomas Whitley instead. Chapter 7. The Truth That Would Have Driven Any Man Mad. Over the next 3 months, 7 more soldiers at Fort Davis died the same way. No warning, no cause, just there 1 minute and gone the next. And Elijah noticed something that made his blood run cold. Every single one of them had touched him, shook his hand, patted him on the back, sat next to him at the fire. The death that should have been his was passing through him like a disease. Every person he came in contact with was taking a piece of it, and when they'd taken enough, their hearts just gave out. Elijah stopped touching people, stopped shaking hands, started wearing gloves even in the scorching summer heat, but it wasn't enough. Just being near him seemed to be enough. The curse, or whatever it was, didn't need skin to travel. It moved through the air, through proximity, through the simple act of existing in the same space. And Elijah realized something that would have driven any sane man straight to the bottle. He couldn't die, but everyone around him would. Chapter 8. The Return to the Cave. In the spring of 1850, Elijah Cutter deserted his post and rode back to the Guadalupe Mountains. He had to find Nalin, had to make her undo whatever she'd done to him, had to find a way to stop the deaths before everyone he'd ever known was in the ground. It took him 3 days to find the cave entrance again. 3 days of wandering through canyons that all looked the same, under a sun that seemed to be mocking him with its indifference. But finally, he found it, and she was waiting for him. Nalin sat at the mouth of the cave like she'd known he was coming, like she'd been sitting there for months, just waiting for him to work up the courage to return. "You want to give it back?" she said. It wasn't a question. Elijah nodded, his throat too dry to speak. Nalin's face didn't change. Those black eyes just stared at him like he was an insect she was considering whether or not to crush. The daughters do not take back what they have given. That is not their way. Death must go somewhere. It always finds a home. Chapter 9. The Deal with Something Older Than the Devil. Elijah fell to his knees in the red dirt. "There has to be a way," he begged. "Please, I can't keep killing people just by being alive. There has to be something I can do." For a long time, Nalin said nothing. She just stared at him with those ancient eyes, watching him like a hawk watches a wounded rabbit. Then, slowly, she spoke. "There is one way, but it is not a path any man has ever walked and lived to tell of." Elijah looked up at her, desperate hope flickering in his eyes. "Tell me." Nalin pointed toward the darkness of the cave. "You must go to where the daughters are born. The place beneath the lake. The place where the water turns to something else. You must offer yourself to the mother." "The mother?" Nalin's eyes seemed to grow even darker, if that was possible. "The one who made the daughters. The one who has been sleeping beneath these mountains since before your kind learned to walk upright. The one whose dreams become reality and whose nightmares become us." Elijah swallowed hard. "And if I do this? If I find this? Mother? What then?" Nalin's lips curled into something that might have been a smile on a human face. On her, it looked like a wound opening. "Then you will finally understand the true price of living when you should have died." Chapter 10. The Descent into Somewhere Worse Than Hell. Elijah followed Nalin down into the caves. They walked for hours, maybe days. Time didn't seem to work right down there. The passages twisted and turned, getting narrower and narrower until Elijah had to crawl on his belly through gaps that scraped skin off his back. But still, they went deeper. The air grew thick and wet. It tasted like copper, like blood. And the deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to change. The stone started looking less like stone and more like something else. Something organic. Something alive. The walls were pulsing, slowly, rhythmically, like the heartbeat of something impossibly vast. Finally, they reached the lake. But it wasn't a lake anymore. The water had turned to something thicker. Something that moved on its own, swirling in patterns that made Elijah's eyes hurt to look at. And in the center of it all, rising from the depths like a nightmare-given form, was the mother. Chapter 11. The Thing That Should Never Be Seen. Elijah couldn't describe what he saw. His mind simply refused to process it. It was vast. That much he knew, so vast that the cavern, which had seemed enormous moments before, now felt like a coffin. It had tentacles, thousands of them, maybe millions. They stretched out in every direction, disappearing into tunnels and cracks in the stone, spreading beneath the earth like the roots of some terrible tree. And at its center, if you could call it a center, there was something that might have been a face. Eyes, dozens of them, all different sizes, all looking at him at once. And a mouth that was also a wound that was also a door to somewhere Elijah didn't want to imagine. The mother spoke, but it didn't use words. Its voice was in Elijah's head, in his bones, in his blood. "You carry my children's gift. You wish to return it." Elijah nodded, unable to find his voice. "There is only one way to return what the daughters have given. You must take their place. You must become a vessel. You must carry the death of others so that they may live." Chapter 12. The choice that wasn't really a choice. Elijah understood then. This was how Nalin had become what she was. Somewhere, sometime, centuries ago, she had been just like him. A dying person who had been healed by the jellyfish. A person who had passed death to everyone around her. And she had made the same choice he was being offered now. Become like her. Become a guardian of the lake. Become something not quite human, but not quite anything else either. Live forever, alone, in the darkness beneath the earth. Or walk away and keep killing everyone he loved until there was no one left. Elijah thought about his mama back in San Antonio, thought about his sister and her 2 little girls, thought about the friends he'd already lost because of what he'd become. He couldn't go back to them, not ever. Even if he refused the mother's offer, he could never be around people again. At least this way, the dying would stop. At least this way, he'd have a purpose. Elijah Cutter looked up at the mother, at those countless eyes watching him with something that might have been curiosity or might have been hunger. "I accept," he said. Chapter 13. The Transformation That Took Everything. The mother's tentacles wrapped around him. Elijah felt himself being pulled down into that thick, swirling water, felt it filling his lungs, his stomach, his veins. It should have killed him. By all rights, he should have drowned in the first 30 seconds, but he didn't. He felt himself changing instead. His bones stretched and cracked and reformed, his skin hardened and darkened, his eyes, once blue as a Texas summer sky, turned black as the void between stars. The process took years, or maybe it took seconds. Time meant nothing in the mother's embrace. When it was finally over, Elijah Cutter was gone. In his place stood something else, something tall and ancient-looking, with eyes that had seen too much and a body that would never die. Nalin was waiting for him at the edge of the lake. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, like she'd expected this all along. Then she turned and walked deeper into the caves, toward another lake, another colony of glowing jellyfish, another place where she would wait for the next dying soul to stumble in. Elijah, or the thing that had been Elijah, understood now. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, scattered beneath the earth all across the world, guardians of the daughters, vessels for the death that had to go somewhere. And now he was one of them. Chapter 40. First Contact. Dr. Sarah Chen was Derek's sister. After his video went viral, she had been recruited by the International Research Team as a marine biologist specializing in jellyfish. She had spent 6 months studying the footage, trying to explain the impossible creatures her brother had filmed. She had failed. So, when a figure emerged from the caves one night and asked to speak with her privately, she wasn't even surprised. She had given up on surprise weeks ago. "My name is Harold Whitmore," the figure said. "I was born in 1891. I've been dead since 1923, and I'm here to tell you everything you want to know about the Daughters of Healing." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. "Why me?" "Because your brother found us first. Because you've been trying to understand us honestly, not exploit us. And because—" Harold paused, reading her life force in a way she couldn't see. "Because you're sick. The cancer you haven't told anyone about. We can help with that." Sarah's composure finally cracked. "How did you—" "We know a lot of things. We've been watching for a long time, but we're tired of just watching. We want to help, really help, not in the shadows anymore." He extended his hand. It looked human enough, but there was something wrong with the way light reflected off his skin. "Will you let us?" Chapter 41. The First Public Healing. Sarah Chen became the first person to be healed by the daughters with the world watching. They did it on live television, in a specially constructed chamber at the cave entrance. Scientists monitored every vital sign. Cameras captured every angle. The whole world held its breath. The jellyfish surrounded her in water that should have been too cold to survive. Their tentacles wrapped around her torso, where the tumors were killing her slowly. It took 6 hours. When she emerged, the cancer was gone. Not in remission. Gone. As if it had never existed. The death that was taken from her was distributed carefully, Harold explained. A few seconds from each of the 47 guardians. They could bear it. They had borne much more. The world watched and didn't know what to think. Some called it a miracle. Some called it a trick. Some called it the beginning of the end of disease itself. All of them were wrong. It was simply the next step in a relationship between two species that had been going on since before recorded history. It was, finally, an introduction. Chapter 42. The Years of Negotiation. The next decade was chaos. Governments wanted to control the caves, pharmaceutical companies wanted to synthesize the jellyfish, religious leaders wanted to declare them divine or demonic depending on their inclination. The Guardians navigated it all with patience born of centuries. They set rules. The healing would be offered freely, but the price would always be paid. One could not exist without the other. Those who tried to cheat the system would face consequences. Some tried anyway. They always did. A Russian oligarch kidnapped 3 daughters and tried to create a private immortality farm. He died 3 months later when the accumulated death debt caught up with him all at once. His heart exploded inside his chest. A Chinese laboratory managed to cultivate a single daughter in captivity. It worked for 2 weeks. Then the scientists started dying one by one, their life force drained by a creature that had been separated from its colony and didn't know any other way to survive. Eventually, the world learned. You couldn't steal from the daughters. You could only receive. Chapter 43. The New Balance. By 2035, a system had emerged. The caves became the first true international territory, governed by a council that included both humans and Guardians. Healing was offered to those who needed it most, with careful monitoring to ensure the death debt was distributed fairly. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. Some people still died to pay for others' miracles, but they were old deaths now, voluntary deaths. Terminally ill patients who chose to give what remained of their life force to save someone younger, someone with more to live for. The Guardians called them the generous ones. Their names were inscribed on the walls of the deepest chamber, where the mother slept. She was still sleeping. The Guardians had decided she wasn't ready to wake. Not yet. The world wasn't ready to meet her. But she dreamed. And in her dreams, she saw a future where her children swam freely in the oceans of the world, where healing was as common as breathing, where death was no longer something to fear, but simply a transformation. The Guardians shared her dreams sometimes. It gave them something to work toward. Chapter 37. The Century of Change. The years passed. World War II came and went. Korea, Vietnam, the Cold War. Through it all, the Guardians watched and waited. They healed when they could, carefully, always ensuring the price was paid by those who could bear it. They prevented outbreaks of the corruption whenever someone tried to steal the daughter's gift. And they prepared, because the mother was right. Humanity was spreading faster than ever, digging deeper, exploring further. In 1972, a team of spelunkers discovered the first lake. They were sworn to secrecy by a very convincing visit from Elijah, but it was a close call. In 1989, a mining company came within 100 feet of the birth chamber before an unexpected geological instability forced them to abandon the project. In 2008, a documentary crew made it all the way to one of the secondary chambers before their cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. The secrets were getting harder to keep. The time for hiding was almost over. Chapter 38. The modern world discovers the truth. It happened, finally, in 2019. A YouTuber named Derek Chen, known for his extreme exploration videos, managed to find a cave entrance that the Guardians had somehow missed. He livestreamed his descent to 2.3 million viewers. He found a lake. He filmed the jellyfish. And when a daughter brushed against his hand and healed a cut he'd gotten climbing down, he captured it all in 4K resolution. The video went viral. Then it went viral again. Then governments got involved. Within a month, there were research teams from 12 countries camped outside the Guadalupe Mountains. Satellites were repositioned. Deep ground sonar was deployed. The mother felt them coming like ants crawling across her skin. "It is time," she said to her guardians. "We cannot hide any longer. We must choose a new way." And for the first time in his long existence, Elijah Cutter felt something he hadn't felt since he was human. Hope. Chapter 39. The Council of Vessels. They gathered in the deepest chamber, around the sleeping form of the mother herself. Nalin was there, of course, and Harold, now nearly a century into his existence as a guardian, and 47 others drawn from caves and lakes and forgotten places across 5 continents. They were the guardians, the vessels, the in-between ones, and they had a decision to make. "We could fight," said one, a woman who had been a samurai before her transformation in 1603. "We could drive them back, collapse the entrances, make them forget." "We've tried that," Nolan said. "It doesn't work anymore. Their technology is too advanced, their curiosity too persistent." "Then we reveal ourselves on our terms," Harold said. "We show them what we are, what we protect, and why. We give them the choice that was given to each of us." Elijah, the eldest among them, nodded slowly. "The mother agrees. The age of healing in shadows is over. Now we must become healers in the light." He looked at each of them in turn. "It will not be easy. They will fear us. Some will try to exploit us. Some will try to destroy us. But if we do nothing, they will find the mother eventually, and they will wake her in the worst possible way." "What do you propose?" the samurai asked. Elijah's ancient face cracked into something that might have been a smile. "We start with one human, one who can speak for us, one who can help them understand." He turned to Harold. "You remember what it was like to be human. You still think like them, in some ways. You will be our voice." Harold felt the weight of 1,000 souls stirring in his consciousness. They were nervous, excited, hopeful. "I'll do it," he said. Chapter 33. The Battle of Vessels. They clashed in the birth chamber, 2 impossible beings fighting a battle that had been fought 100 times before in the long history of the caves. Rawlings was faster, driven by insatiable need. But Harold had something Rawlings didn't. He had 1,000 souls fighting alongside him. Every person Rawlings had killed, every life force he had stolen, was now inside Harold, and they wanted revenge. Harold felt them lending him strength, felt Morrison guiding his movements, felt Jenkins showing him where Rawlings would strike next. The battle raged through the floating spheres, neither combatant tiring because neither of them was truly alive anymore. But slowly, inevitably, Harold began to gain the upper hand, because Rawlings was fighting alone. And Harold had never been alone since the moment he accepted the transfer. Chapter 34. The Cure for Corruption. In the end, it wasn't a killing blow that ended the fight. Harold grabbed Rawlings by the shoulders and held on. The corrupted sergeant thrashed and screamed, trying to drain Harold's life force, but there was nothing left to drain. Harold was already dead in every way that mattered. Instead, something else happened. The connection went both ways. Harold pushed. He sent the souls of the dead flooding through that connection, not as an attack, but as a healing. Every person Rawlings had killed, every voice he had silenced, spoke to him now. They showed him what he had done, made him feel what they had felt, forced him to confront the monster he had become. And somewhere, buried beneath all that corruption and hunger, Sergeant William Rawlings finally understood. He stopped fighting. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears streaming down a face that was already beginning to dissolve. "I'm so sorry." "I know," Harold said. "They know." The corruption left Rawlings in a rush of black light. His body crumbled, not to dust, but to something that looked like sea foam. And then, impossibly, the foam drifted upward, toward the spheres, toward the unborn daughters. It was absorbed into them, one drop at a time. The corruption hadn't been destroyed. It had been returned to the source, recycled, made clean again. Chapter 35. The Mother Speaks. The chamber went still. Then, for the first time in 3,000 years, the mother spoke directly to a guardian. Her voice wasn't sound. It was understanding, comprehension that bypassed the ears and went straight into the soul. "You have done well, young one." Harold fell to his knees. The weight of her attention was almost unbearable. The balance is restored. The cycle continues. But there is something you must know. "What?" Harold managed to croak. "The age of hiding is ending. Your kind multiplies too fast, spreads too far. Soon they will find us, no matter how deep we hide. And when they do, the temptation will be too great. There will be more, like the stolen one. Many more. What do we do?" The mother's attention seemed to shift, to encompass not just Harold but all of her guardians, scattered in caves and lakes and dark places across the world. "We prepare, we teach, and when the time comes, we emerge. Not as monsters, as healers, as we were always meant to be." Chapter 36. The Survivor's Story. General Stone and the 4 remaining soldiers emerged from the caves 3 weeks after they had entered. They were changed men, quieter, humbler. They had seen things that no amount of military training could have prepared them for. Stone resigned his commission the day he got back to Fort Bliss. He never spoke of what happened in the Guadalupe Mountains, but he did spend the rest of his life quietly opposing any military research into anomalous phenomena. Some things, he had learned, were not meant to be weaponized. The official report listed the expedition as a training accident. 18 men dead due to cave-in and related complications. The files were classified and buried in a warehouse somewhere, forgotten by everyone except a few conspiracy theorists who couldn't prove anything. Ayanna, the Apache girl who had tried to warn them, grew up to become a medicine woman. She told stories about the caves to her grandchildren, and they told their grandchildren. The old ways survived, as they always had. Chapter 29. The Transfer of Souls. The process took 3 days, or 3 years, or 3 centuries. Time had no meaning in the chamber where Elijah brought Harold Whitmore. The daughters surrounded him in the water, their tentacles gentle this time, not healing but transferring. Every soul that Rawlings had stolen flowed through them and into Harold. He felt Morrison die, felt the young man's confusion, his fear, his final desperate prayer for his mother. He felt Jenkins, the first to disappear, consumed by something older than the caves themselves. He felt 7 more soldiers, their lives extinguished in the darkness, their death energy stored in Rawlings like fuel in a tank. And he felt others, so many others, because Rawlings hadn't been the first. Over the centuries, there had been dozens like him, people who had stolen the healing, who had become carriers of the hungry death. Their accumulated victims numbered in the thousands. Harold felt every single one of them. When it was finally over, he wasn't Harold Whitmore anymore. He was a library of the dead, a walking memorial to everyone who had paid the price for someone else's miracle. Chapter 30. The New Guardian Rises. Harold opened his eyes and saw the world differently. He could see the life force in everything. The faint glow of the bacteria on the cave walls, the brighter light of the jellyfish in the lake, the blazing fire of the living soldiers who were being led back to the surface by Nolan. And he could see the darkness, too. The anti-light that surrounded Rawlings, who was even now trying to find his way deeper into the caves, drawn by an instinct he didn't understand toward the mother herself. "The stolen one still lives," Elijah said. "He must be stopped before he reaches her." What happens if he does? Then the mother wakes. And if she wakes, hungry? Elijah's ancient face somehow grew even grimmer. The last time she woke hungry, your kind called it an extinction event. Harold felt the weight of 1,000 souls pressing against his consciousness. They were scared. They didn't want to die again. "Show me how to stop him," Harold said. Chapter 31. The Hunt in the Deep. Rawlings had gone feral. Whatever humanity he'd had left was gone now, burned away by the constant hunger that drove him deeper and deeper into the earth. He moved on all fours, his body twisted and elongated, his eyes blazing with stolen light. Harold followed the trail of dead things he left behind. Cave, fish, insects. A colony of bats that had roosted in these caves for 10,000 years, reduced to desiccated husks in seconds. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became. The walls pulsed with increasing urgency. The mother's heartbeat was getting louder. "She knows he's coming," Elijah said. "She's preparing to wake." "Is that why it's getting warmer?" "No. It's getting warmer because we're approaching the birth chamber, the place where new daughters are created." Elijah's voice dropped to a whisper. "If he reaches it, if he drains even one of the unborn." "What?" "Then we lose any chance of maintaining the balance. The healing stops forever, and the death that's been accumulating for millennia will have to go somewhere." Harold didn't ask where. He already knew. Everywhere, all at once. Chapter 32. The Confrontation. They found Rawlings at the edge of the birth chamber. The room was vast, so vast that Harold couldn't see the ceiling or the far walls. Floating in the air because gravity seemed optional, here were thousands of translucent spheres, each one containing a developing daughter. Rawlings was reaching for the nearest one, his mouth open in anticipation, drool running down his chin. "Stop," Harold commanded. His voice echoed through the chamber in ways it shouldn't have. It carried the weight of 1,000 souls, and even Rawlings felt it. The creature that had been a sergeant turned to face him. "More," it hissed. "Need more. Never enough, never full." "And that's because you weren't meant to carry it," Harold said. "The hunger isn't real. It's a corruption, a cancer. The daughters can heal it, but only if you let them." For a moment, something human flickered in Rawlings' eyes. Fear, confusion, the desperate hope of a man who realizes he's drowning. "Help me," he whispered. Then the moment passed, and the hunger surged back twice as strong. Rawlings lunged. Chapter 25. The Hunger That Couldn't Be Satisfied. Sergeant Rawlings killed his first man 4 hours after his transformation. It happened fast. Private Morrison had made the mistake of putting his hand on Rawlings' shoulder, trying to congratulate him on his miraculous recovery. The moment their skin touched, Morrison collapsed. His face went gray, his eyes rolled back. And Rawlings shuddered with pleasure as decades of Morrison's life force flowed into him. When it was over, Morrison looked like a man who had died of old age. His hair had turned white. His skin had shriveled. He was 23 years old. Rawlings looked down at the body and felt nothing but the craving for more. "What have you done?" Harold screamed. Rawlings turned to him with those glowing blue eyes. "I'm still hungry, Doctor," So very hungry. General Stone put 3 bullets in Rawlings' chest. The sergeant stumbled back, looked down at the holes in his uniform, and laughed. That tickles, sir. Chapter 26. The Retreat That Became a Massacre. General Stone ordered an immediate retreat. For once in his arrogant life, he recognized that he was out of his depth. They had found something in these caves, all right. Something that couldn't be controlled. Something that couldn't be weaponized. Something that was now hunting them. Rawlings picked them off one by one as they tried to find their way back to the surface. He moved through the darkness like he was part of it, appearing behind men and draining them before they could even scream. Of the 23 who had entered, only 7 made it to the halfway point. Harold was among them, his scientific equipment long abandoned, running on pure survival instinct. That's when they saw him. A figure blocking the tunnel ahead, 8 feet tall, skin like cracked leather, eyes like pools of absolute darkness. Elijah Cutter had come to clean up the mess. Chapter 27. The Guardian's Judgment. You should not have come here, Elijah said, his voice like gravel scraping across stone. General Stone raised his pistol with a trembling hand. Get out of our way, whatever you are. I am the consequence, Elijah replied. I am what happens when men think they can take from the daughters without giving in return. He moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. One moment, he was 20 feet away. The next, he had Stone by the throat, lifting the general off the ground like he weighed nothing. Your soldier stole a gift that wasn't meant for him. He took the healing without accepting the price. Now the balance is broken. Now the hunger spreads. Stone gurgled, his face turning purple. There is only one way to fix what you have done, Elijah continued. Someone must pay the accumulated debt. Someone must take all the death that your soldier has been stealing. He dropped Stone to the ground and turned those bottomless eyes on the surviving soldiers. One of you must volunteer, or I will choose for you. Chapter 28. The Doctor's Choice. Harold Whitmore stepped forward. He didn't know why. Maybe it was guilt for helping lead these men to their deaths. Maybe it was the scientist in him, curious to understand what would happen next. Maybe it was simply that he was tired of being afraid. I'll do it, he said. Whatever needs to be done, I'll do it. Elijah studied him for a long moment. You understand what you're offering? You will take into yourself every death that the stolen one has caused, every life he has drained. It will not be pleasant. I understand. And you will not die, Elijah continued. That is the cruelest part. You will feel every death, carry every soul, and you will not be allowed the release of your own ending. Harold swallowed hard. What will I become? Something like me, Elijah said. Something in between. Neither alive nor dead. A vessel for the balance that must be maintained. Harold looked back at the surviving soldiers. At Stone, still gasping on the ground. At the darkness behind them where Rawlings was surely still hunting. Let the others go, he said. Let them return to the surface with their lives. That's my condition. Elijah nodded slowly. Agreed. Chapter 20. The descent begins. 23 men entered the caves on August 14th, 1923. Harold was near the back of the column, clutching his scientific equipment like a talisman. He had instruments for measuring temperature, humidity, atmospheric pressure. He had vials for collecting water samples. He had a camera that weighed almost as much as he did. None of it would help him. The caves were exactly as the files had described. Dark, wet, endless. But there was something the files hadn't mentioned. Something Harold noticed within the first hour. The walls were moving. Not dramatically, Not in any way he could point to and say, "Look there." Just a subtle pulse, like the breathing of something vast and patient. Harold told himself it was an optical illusion, a trick of the torchlight. He told himself that all the way down. Chapter 21. The first man to disappear. Private Jenkins was on point when it happened. One moment he was there, his torch cutting through the darkness ahead. The next moment, the darkness swallowed him whole. No scream, no struggle, just gone. General Stone ordered the men to halt. They searched for 2 hours, found nothing but Jenkins' torch still burning on the ground, and a single boot filled with something that looked like black honey. "Cave in," Stone declared, though there was no rubble. "Keep moving." The men exchanged glances but said nothing. "You didn't question General Stone. Not if you wanted to keep your teeth." Harold picked up the boot when no one was looking. The substance inside was warm, and it was moving. He dropped it and didn't tell anyone what he'd seen. Chapter 22. The lake reveals itself. They found the first lake on the 3rd day. It was exactly as the old reports described: black water, still as glass, and beneath the surface, a glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The jellyfish. Harold pushed to the front of the group, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. He had never seen bioluminescence like this. The light wasn't just blue. It shifted, pulsed, almost like it was communicating. "Beautiful," he whispered. "Profitable," General Stone corrected. The general ordered his men to start collecting specimens. They had brought nets and glass containers specifically for this purpose. The first soldier to put his net in the water was a sergeant named Rawlings. He had survived Belleau Wood. He had killed 17 men with his bare hands. The moment his net touched the surface, something grabbed it from below. Rawlings was pulled into the lake so fast he didn't even have time to let go. The water churned for exactly 3 seconds. Then it went still again. When the glow returned, Rawlings was floating face down on the surface. His body was covered in the jellyfish, their tentacles wrapped around him like a lover's embrace. And he was smiling. Chapter 23. The man who came back different. They pulled Rawlings out, expecting to retrieve a corpse. Instead, they found a man more alive than any of them had ever seen. The scars from Belleau Wood were gone. The chronic pain in his back that had plagued him for 5 years, gone. The slight tremor in his hands from shell shock, gone. Rawlings stood up like a man reborn. He looked at his hands, then at General Stone, and laughed. "I can feel everything," he said. "Every heartbeat of every man in this cave. I can feel the blood moving through your veins." Harold stepped back instinctively. Something was very wrong with Rawlings' eyes. They had been brown before. Now they were shot through with threads of luminescent blue. "Sergeant," Stone said carefully, "how do you feel?" Rawlings turned those terrible eyes on his commanding officer and smiled. "Hungry, sir. Very, very hungry." Chapter 24. The Guardian Awakens. Deep in the caves, in a chamber that no army expedition would ever find, Elijah Cutter opened his eyes for the first time in 50 years. Something had changed. The delicate balance he had spent decades maintaining was being disrupted. He could feel it in the water, in the stone, in the very air he no longer needed to breathe. Someone had taken a daughter without permission. Someone had stolen the healing without paying the price. The mother was stirring in her sleep, and her dreams were turning dark. Elijah rose from his meditation pool, water streaming off a body that had long ago stopped being human. His joints cracked and popped, stone dust falling from skin that had become more mineral than flesh. Nalan appeared at the entrance to his chamber. Her face, usually so impassive, showed something that might have been concern. "They've come again," she said. "But these ones are different. These ones want to take, not receive." Elijah nodded slowly. "Then we must remind them why the daughters are not for taking." Part EI. The Reckoning. Chapter 16. The Girl Who Remembered Too Much. In the summer of 1923, a 12-year-old Apache girl named Ayanna woke up screaming in the middle of the night. Her grandmother rushed to her bedside, found her drenched in sweat, eyes wide as dinner plates, speaking in a language the old woman hadn't heard since her own grandmother had died 40 years prior. The language of the daughters. Ayanna had been born different. Everyone in the reservation knew it. She could see things other people couldn't. Shadows that moved when nothing was casting them. Faces in the water that didn't belong to anyone alive. But this was something else. This was a vision so powerful it left burn marks on her palms. She had seen the caves, the lakes, the glowing creatures that swam in eternal darkness. And she had seen him. A man who wasn't a man anymore. A guardian who had been waiting in the darkness for 73 years. A guardian who was about to wake up. Because something was coming. Something that would make the mother herself tremble in her ancient sleep. Chapter 17. The Scientist Who Didn't Believe in Monsters. Dr. Harold Whitmore was a man of science. He had 3 degrees from Harvard. He had published papers in journals that most people couldn't even pronounce. He had spent his entire career proving that everything had a rational explanation. Ghosts? Misidentified, natural phenomena. Monsters? Exaggerated wildlife sightings. Miracles? Statistical anomalies and placebo effects. So, when the United States Army approached him in 1923 with a classified file about anomalous healing events in West Texas, Harold Whitmore saw it as just another opportunity to debunk superstitious nonsense. The file contained 74 documented cases spanning back to 1,849. People who should have died but didn't. Wounds that healed overnight. Cancers that vanished without treatment. And then, weeks or months later, unexplained deaths in their vicinity. Harold read through every case with growing irritation. This was clearly some kind of contagious disease combined with folk medicine. Nothing supernatural about it. He would go to Texas. He would find the source. He would explain it with science. And that, as Harold Whitmore would soon learn, was the most dangerous assumption he had ever made. Chapter 18. The Army's Interest in Immortality. What Harold didn't know was that the Army didn't want to debunk anything. They wanted to weaponize it. General Marcus Stone had read those same files with very different eyes. He saw soldiers who couldn't die. An army that could march through any battlefield and come out the other side whole. The Great War had ended 5 years ago. But Stone knew another one was coming. He could feel it in his bones. And when it came, America needed an edge. If there was something in those caves that could heal any wound, Stone was going to find it. And if there was a price to pay, well, that's what enemies were for. He assembled a team, 20 soldiers, the best of the best. Men who had seen things in the trenches of France that had broken their minds but not their will. Harold Whitmore would be their guide, their cover story, their plausible deniability. And if the good doctor got himself killed in the process, that was just one less loose end to worry about. Chapter 19. The Warning That Came Too Late. Ayanna tried to warn them. She walked 15 miles from the reservation to the army camp that had been set up at the base of the Guadalupe Mountains. She was dusty and exhausted and probably looked half mad to the guards who stopped her at the perimeter. "You can't go in there," she said, her English broken but urgent. "The sleeper is waking. The mother knows you're coming. If you go in, you won't come out the same." The soldiers laughed at her. One of them, a corporal with a scar across his chin, gave her a canteen of water and told her to run along home before she got herself in trouble. Harold Whitmore watched from a distance. Something about the girl's eyes made him uncomfortable. They were old eyes that had seen things no child should see. But General Stone was already barking orders. They were moving out at dawn. Whatever warnings the girl had, they were already too late. Epilogue. The story that never ends. The old Apache elders don't whisper anymore. They sing. Loud and proud, songs about the giant woman who first entered the caves, about the daughters who heal with a price, about the guardians who gave everything so that others could live. Their great-grandchildren carry those songs across the galaxy now, telling them to species that have no concept of Earth or humanity, but understand the universal truth at their core. Death must go somewhere. The price must always be paid. But in the paying, something beautiful happens. We become connected. We become part of something larger than ourselves. We become, in the end, exactly what we were always meant to be. Gardeners of life, keepers of the balance, daughters and sons of a mother who has been caring for us since before we knew we needed care. And somewhere, in a cave that no longer exists beneath mountains that have long since crumbled to dust, the memory of that first healing still echoes. A man with a bullet in his belly, a woman too tall to be human, a lake full of glowing creatures who demanded a price no one understood, and a choice, always a choice, to accept the gift and pay the price, or to walk away and never know what might have been. Most people, given that choice, chose the same thing. They chose to live. They chose to heal. They chose to be part of the garden. And the garden grew, and grew, and grew, until it covered the universe like a blanket of light. And death finally had a home. And so did everything else. The end. Chapter 53. The Last Human Guardian. Harold Whitmore was the last of his kind. All the other guardians had either passed on or transformed into something beyond human. Something that could travel the cosmic network without a physical body. But Harold held on to his humanity. The 1,000 souls inside him wouldn't let him forget what it meant to be a person. "You could join us," the new guardians would say. "You could see what lies beyond." "Not yet," Harold always replied. "Someone needs to remember where we came from." He became the keeper of history, the one who told stories to each new generation of bridges, the one who explained why the price was necessary, why the balance mattered. And every year, on the anniversary of the day he had accepted his transformation, he would visit the beach where Elijah had died. He would sit in the sand, let the daughters brush against his feet, and remember. A scientist who didn't believe in monsters. A general who wanted to weaponize miracles. A cave full of glowing jellyfish, and a woman too tall to be human. A choice that shouldn't have been brave, but was. Chapter 54. The Children of the Bridge. Maya's great-great-great-granddaughter was named Hope. It was an appropriate name. By the time she was born, humanity had spread to 3 other planets, carried by the mother's network to worlds that had their own versions of the daughters. Hope was the first bridge born off-world. Her connection to the cosmic network was stronger than any of her ancestors. And she had a question that no one had ever asked before. "If the daughters can heal anything," she said to Harold during one of his visits to the Mars colony, "why didn't they heal death itself? Why does the price still have to be paid?" Harold had been waiting 200 years for someone to ask that question. "Because death isn't a sickness," he said. "It's a transformation. The daughters don't eliminate death, they redirect it. They make sure it goes where it needs to go." "But why does it need to go anywhere?" Harold smiled. It was the smile of someone who had carried 1,000 souls for centuries and understood things that couldn't easily be explained. Because life needs death to have meaning. Without an ending, there's no story. Without sacrifice, there's no love. The daughters understood this before your species learned to walk upright. Hope thought about that for a long time. So, we'll never be immortal? No, but you'll never be alone either. Every soul that passes through the daughters becomes part of something eternal. That's not immortality. It's something better. Chapter 55, The Final Price. In the year 3000, Harold Whitmore finally asked to rest. He had been a guardian for over 1,000 years. He had watched humanity spread across the galaxy. He had guided countless bridges, trained hundreds of new guardians, told millions of stories about where it all began. But the souls inside him were tired. They wanted to join the others in the mother's memory. They wanted to, finally, completely rest. "Are you sure?" the mother asked. Her voice was everywhere now, woven into the fabric of the galaxy itself. "I'm sure," Harold said. "It's time." The mother gathered him gently, as she had gathered Elijah so long ago. "The death you carry will pass to me. I will distribute it across 1 billion stars where it will be barely a whisper in each soul. You will become human again, briefly." Harold closed his eyes. He felt the weight lifting. 1,000 souls rising from his consciousness, joining the cosmic network, becoming part of something infinite. And then he felt the sun again. Not Earth's sun. He was on a planet he had never seen, orbiting a star he had never known existed when he was human. But it was warm. Just like Elijah had said. "It's beautiful," Harold whispered. "It always has been," the mother replied. "That's what the daughters have always been trying to show you. Not how to avoid death, but how to appreciate life." Harold smiled. And then, after 1,000 years, he finally understood. Chapter 49, The Last Sunrise. Harold was there when it happened. They had carried Elijah to a beach in what used to be Galveston. The water lapped at the shore, filled with glowing daughters. The sky was turning pink. The transformation took only minutes. The sentries fell away. The inhuman features softened. The darkness in his eyes faded to a clear, bright blue. For the first time since 1850, Elijah Cutter was a man again. He was old, ancient. His body was barely holding together, but he was smiling. "It's warm," he said, his voice cracked and weak, but unmistakably human. "I forgot how warm the sun could be." Harold knelt beside him. "Is there anything you want me to tell anyone? Any message for the future?" Elijah thought about it. Around them, 1,000 daughters surfaced, their glow pale against the growing dawn. Tell them the price is always worth paying. Tell them that healing and death are not opposites. They're partners. 2 parts of the same dance. He coughed, a wet sound. "Tell them, I was a Texas Ranger once. I got shot in the belly and should have died under a mesquite tree. Instead, I lived long enough to see my species join something bigger than itself." His eyes drifted to the horizon, where the first edge of the sun was appearing. "That's not a bad trade. Not bad at all." The sun broke over the ocean, Light flooded the beach. Elijah Cutter breathed in the warm, salt-tinged air. And then, finally, after 240 years, he breathed out. Chapter 50. The Garden Grows. 100 years later, the world was unrecognizable. The daughters swam in every ocean, maintaining the delicate balance of life across the planet. The mother's tentacles had spread around the globe, a nervous system that connected every ecosystem. Humans lived alongside the guardians now, many of them choosing transformation voluntarily, not out of desperation, but out of desire to be part of something larger. Maya's descendants continued to serve as bridges, each generation more connected to the cosmic network than the last. And in the space between stars, the mother had begun to reach out to her siblings on other worlds. Harold Whitmore, now the eldest guardian, sometimes wondered what Elijah would think of it all. The man who had been a Texas Ranger, who had crawled into a cave to escape vultures, who had made a choice that changed the course of human history. He hoped Elijah would be proud. He hoped they all would. Chapter 51. The Message from Beyond. On the anniversary of Elijah's passing, Harold always performed the same ritual. He would swim down to the deepest part of the mother's consciousness, where the souls of all the guardians who had passed were preserved. There, in that strange space between memory and reality, he could speak to them. "Old friend," he said to the light that had been Elijah, "you should see what we've become." The light pulsed. Not words, but feeling. Pride, joy, peace, and something else. A message. The daughter who healed me is still out there. She remembers me. She wants you to know that the healing never truly ends. Every soul I touched, every life I helped extend, is still connected, still part of the garden. Harold felt tears on cheeks that hadn't been wet in over a century. "The price is always worth paying," Elijah's essence continued, "but the reward is greater than any of us ever imagined." Harold carried that message back to the surface. He shared it with the guardians, with the bridges, with the humans who were just beginning to understand their place in the cosmic ecosystem. And the garden continued to grow. Chapter 52. Nalan's Farewell. Nalan had been the first. Before Elijah, before any of them, she had walked into the caves and emerged as something new. No one knew exactly how old she was. The mother's memories suggested she had been transformed during the last ice age, but even that might have been wrong. She had never asked for rest, had never sought an ending. But after watching Elijah find peace, something changed in her ancient heart. "I think," she said to Harold one day, "I would like to see what's on the other side of the stars." The mother had been preparing for this. Her siblings in distant galaxies had been reaching out, inviting guardians to join them, to help spread the balance to new worlds. Nalan would be the first to make the journey. "Will you remember us?" Harold asked. Nalan's face, which had been carved by 100 centuries of wind and water and patience, softened into something that might have been a smile. "I will carry every moment, every soul, every sunset, and every healing. The mother never forgets, and now neither do I." She stepped into the light the mother had prepared, a doorway to somewhere impossibly far away. "Thank you," she said, "for continuing what I started." And then she was gone. "Perhaps it is time to show them what I truly am." Maya bowed her head. "What are you, truly?" The mother's answer wasn't words. It was a vision, shared directly into Maya's mind. She saw the universe as the mother saw it. Vast, ancient, teeming with life in forms that defied imagination. And threaded through it all, like a nervous system connecting everything that lived, was a network of consciousness. The daughters were just one node in that network. The mother was a hub, connected to similar entities on 1,000 different worlds. Death and life, healing and harm, these were just the local expressions of something much larger, a cosmic balance that had been maintained since the first cell divided. And now, finally, humanity was being invited to be part of it. Chapter 47. The Awakening. The mother rose from the depths of the earth for the first time in 10 million years. It took 3 days. The ground shook, mountains shifted. Scientists around the world thought it was the biggest earthquake in recorded history. When she finally emerged, she was nothing like the monster that the old stories described. Or rather, she was exactly like the monster. But humans had finally learned to see monsters differently. She was vast, incomprehensible, beautiful in a way that made people weep just looking at her. She spread across the Gulf of Mexico like an island made of thought. Her tentacles stretched for hundreds of miles, reaching toward coastlines but never quite touching them. And from her body, millions of daughters dispersed into the world's oceans. They had been confined to caves and underground lakes for so long. Now, finally, they could spread, could heal the planet itself, not just the people on it. Coral reefs that had been dying for decades began to recover overnight. Fish populations exploded. The great patches of plastic in the ocean began to break down, consumed by creatures that had been engineered for exactly this purpose. The mother was gardening again, and this time she had help. Chapter 48. Elijah's Rest. Elijah Cutter had been a guardian for 240 years. He had watched humanity go from wagons to rockets, from telegraphs to quantum computers. He had guided dozens of new guardians through their transformation. He had maintained the balance through world wars and near extinctions. He was tired. "Is it possible?" he asked the mother, standing on the shore of what had once been West Texas and was now underwater, part of the new Gulf ecology. "Can a guardian finally rest? You have served longer than any other. You have earned whatever you desire." "I want to feel the sun again, really feel it, one more time." The mother's touch was gentle. Her smallest tentacle, no thicker than a human finger, brushed against his cheek. "The death you carry will pass to me. I will distribute it across the oceans, where it will be barely a whisper in each creature. You will become human again, briefly. And then you will die. Truly, finally, your soul will join the others in my memory, and you will rest forever." Elijah smiled. It was strange, feeling his face move in that old, familiar way. "Thank you." Chapter 44. Ayana's great-granddaughter. In 2041, a young woman named Maya arrived at the caves. She was Ayana's great-granddaughter, raised on stories of the guardians and the daughters. She had known about them her whole life, long before the rest of the world learned the truth. She came not seeking healing, but purpose. "I want to understand them," she told Harold. "My great-grandmother had visions. My grandmother could sense the daughters from miles away. My mother could communicate with them, a little. Each generation gets closer, I think. I think we're supposed to help. The Apache, I mean. We've always known about this place. Maybe there's a reason." Harold studied her. A century of experience had given him a good sense for people. "You know what happened to your great-grandmother's visions? They came from a connection to the daughters, a connection that grows stronger in each generation of your line. But it's not without cost." "What cost?" "You'll see things, feel things, things no human is meant to experience. It will change you, not into one of us, but into something new, something we don't have a name for yet. Maya thought about it for a long time. "Show me," she said. Chapter 45. The Bridge Between Worlds. Maya became the first bridge. That's what they called her, eventually. A human who could communicate directly with the daughters, translate their alien thoughts into words that other humans could understand. It was agonizing at first. The daughters didn't think in language. They thought in feelings, in colors, in concepts that had no human equivalent. But slowly, painfully, Maya learned to bridge the gap. And what she learned changed everything. The daughters weren't just healers. They were recorders. Every person they had ever touched, every soul they had ever held, was remembered. Their collective memories stretched back millions of years, to a time when the mother herself was young. They remembered the dinosaurs, the ice ages, the rise and fall of species that humans would never know existed. And they remembered their purpose. They were gardeners, Maya reported. Gardeners of life itself. They didn't just heal individuals. They shaped evolution, guided it, nudged species toward survival when they were about to stumble into extinction. Humans weren't an accident. The daughters had been guiding them all along. Chapter 46. The Mother's Choice. In 2089, the mother finally woke. Not because of an attack or a threat, but because Maya asked her to. "The world is ready," Maya said, standing before that vast consciousness for the first time. She was old now, her body failing despite the daughter's best efforts. Some deaths couldn't be postponed forever. The mother's awareness filled the chamber. Those countless eyes, some larger than Maya herself, all focused on this one tiny human. "Ready for what, little bridge?" "To meet you, to understand you, to become partners instead of patients." The mother considered this. Her thoughts moved slowly, each one carrying the weight of eons. "Your kind has surprised me. When they first discovered us, I thought they would destroy themselves trying to possess the healing. Instead, they learned. They adapted. Perhaps they are ready."